Hello, welcome to episode 1 of the AHM Podcast. My name is Sterling. I am one of the co-directors of marketing in AHM, and I'll be the host of this little new mini-series that we're doing. So we're doing these podcasts because we can't celebrate traditionally on campus, obviously, with everything going on, but we wanted to continue the conversation, and we wanted to provide an outlet for people and other clubs to share some ideas during this month to celebrate. So this will just be a short series with a few episodes where we have some clubs lined up and some guests to just speak a little bit about their experience, some various topics that they've wanted to bring up. Today for episode 1, we have Quan from the Vietnamese Student Association, so thank you so much for being here and joining us. Quan, if you would like to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about the club.
All right. Hi, I'm Quan Lee. I'm a freshman for this year, class of 23, in the LS program. I want to transfer into Gallatin, hopefully, and build a concentration around consciousness, self-identity, and like what it means to be like an individual. I am part of VSA as a member of the public relations team, and I will be head of that team next year. So what I do in our organization is basically just share information about our event, make people feel at home like during the event, and just I guess relate to the public as like the name implies, just deal with like public matters. VSA is the Vietnamese Student Association, and what we do is we promote Vietnamese heritage and culture, and it's just like a nice little community where people who identify as Vietnamese can come together and just like meet new people and have a good time.
Tell us a little bit about just some events that you guys put on.
So in the spring semester, we had a game night, which is basically like we had food and people would come in. There were like different tables and stations where we could play like Vietnamese. There were some Vietnamese games such as like Vietnamese trivia. There were like traditional Vietnamese games such as I can't remember the name right now, but there were some traditional Vietnamese games, and there was like a dance station, and there were like tables, and just like it was a nice event to de-stress right when the semester started, but like not like too early, I don't think. We had a Thut event. Thut is like the Vietnamese Lunar New Year's, where there were different stations set up too, where people can get food, participate in like games, and just like mingle with each other.
How long have you been part of VSA?
I started in VSA like right when like they announced that they were like recruiting new members, which is like I think early September. I applied and I got in, and I've been with them since.
So I'm wondering like what you guys are doing or any plans you guys have during this quarantine process, since all the clubs have had to abandon ship and figure something new out.
We kind of just like went MIA, I think. Like in the group chat, we're still pretty active. We like still talk to each other in the group chat and stuff, but like to the public, we're not really doing any new events because it's really hard to like be with other people during the quarantine. Our president is leaving next year, so we're gonna have a new president, and I'm excited to see like all the new plans that they will come up with next year. I think we're just planning for the future for now.
The topic that you put down that you wanted to talk about today was Asian American identity and challenging the stereotypes presented by media and society, which obviously in this time period in the last few months have gone rampant.
Yeah, it's there's like if you're on Instagram at all and you follow like any Asian people, you'll see like countless stories of like victims of like hate crimes, and I think it's just awful because like but it's awful because like Asian Americans or just like Americans in general are being targeted by like people who are like ignorant, and we specifically are being targeted because of like the virus originating in China, and there's like huge conspiracy theories about like this and that, and that just like brings hatred into like communities, and there has been so many physical assaults, not even in America, but like around the world too, against Asian people, and I think it's just really sad. But like, and it's like really sad too because like before the virus, like I believe like like Asian Americans in media were becoming really popular. Like Simon Liu just got like casted as like a Marvel hero, which is like unheard of in the West. Like there weren't any Asian like superheroes. Like in the media, most like Asian roles are played by protagonist. I mean, not the protagonist, like the antagonist. Like either we were the like goofy sidekick who didn't really do much to help like the main protagonist, or like the villain that the heroes were fighting, like in Fast and Furious. We were like the sidekick, and like the action, like most action like genres in Fast and Furious, like we were always either the sidekick and the villain, like that the main hero would fight against. In like most teenage like dramas or like just like high school things too, we were like that, like not like the outcast, but like just the comic relief character. And I think that brings a very negative stereotype as how our society views Asians in general. And because of that, individuals kind of internalize this image of themselves, which then limits their possibilities on what they can become in the future.
Absolutely. And well, what do you think about the situation before all of this? Because it was improving, but obviously it was not perfect.
I think things were looking up, but there were still a lot of things that could be improved. I know like the whole Eastern beauty standards, such as like Eastern Asian people from like China, Japan, like Korea, they were starting to like make waves in the West because of K-pop in particular, which is like a very good thing. It promotes a different type of masculinity. Traditionally in the West, there's been a lot of discrimination against Asians, like against our like in males, because we weren't quote unquote masculine enough when K-pop first became popular. The media was like saying this and that about K-pop, saying that like why are they wearing makeup and why are they like so like pretty and like small and all that, like are just slander against like what like the pinnacle of masculinity is. Even though like even Western Hollywood celebrities, they all use makeup, but no one really talks about that. And I think there's heavy media bias against Asian Americans, like against Asians in general because of that. But saying so, like there still can be a lot done, because even those like everything has like biases. Even Eastern beauty standards, they're very heavily biased towards people, like against people with like darker complexions and other like Asians. But like some like I like even if like Asians are getting like positive like reinforcement from K-pop, there's also some side effects, like negative side effects, such as like people who don't really fit the Eastern like K-pop beauty standard, like people with darker complexions or people like with like just like Southern Asians in general. Like, we don't really have like the same like face shape or like just like the structure. So like we're still like viewed like not in the same light, which like internalizes a lot of like self-hatred as well.
For
So
sure.
I think there can be a lot of like representation that still needs to be done in the future in media and entertainment.
Absolutely. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I definitely think that with the popularization of K-pop, there's now like a big fetishization of that
Those
specific kind of
most
Asian
definitely.
male, right?
You go on K-pop. I mean, not K-pop. You go on Twitter. You go on TikTok. You'll definitely see it. A lot of my female friends are also guilty of it too, and yeah, it's definitely like a fetishization, which like fetishization in itself is just unhealthy, because you view the person as just like their Asianness. Like it's just a superficial way of being attracted to someone just based on like something they can't control. Like you don't really see, like you don't really choose to be Asian. You're just born with it. And because of that, like people will overlook other qualities that you yourself work on, and they will just overlook that, and they would just like you or fetishize you because you're born a certain race, which I think is very unhealthy and like destructive towards like a person's self growth and like how they mature into like how they like grow their own identity. But it does like it has done some good in the like in like view like having like letting Asians be seen as attractive. However, because I know like before K-pop hit, Asians were like mostly seen as like unattractive, except for in like niche areas such as like California and New York. But like in most of America, like Asians would always rank the lowest on like dating apps. K-pop really changed that like really shifted that perspective. But too much of a thing can also be like bad. So there's like moderation in that.
Yeah, I think we're still in a phase where it's new and things hopefully start normalizing themselves. So
Yeah.
right now we're kind of just in the phase where it's like really in your face and people
Yeah.
are still adapting to this. So you mentioned specifically Asian American identity. So were you born here?
So I've always struggled with my own identity. I was
Uh-huh.
born in Vietnam. I lived in Vietnam until I was 2 years old, and I moved to America.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Houston for like a couple years, and I moved to Chicago. Then I moved to New York State, Buffalo, New York, near Niagara Falls.
Oh wow,
I
okay.
lived till I was 9. Then I moved back to Vietnam for like middle school. I came back to America for high school. So like you would say that like I really I find it very hard to like fit myself into any one identity, which is why I struggle a lot with like my own Asian and American identity.
Right.
But I like right now like being in like VSA and just like talking more and like interacting with like people from both like the West and the East and all that really like helps me synthesize both into like my own thing and help me own up to like I am who I am and I don't have to like fit into any label.
So, I mean, if you're comfortable talking about it, like what were some of those challenges growing up?
Well, like in America, like Asians are like stereotyped as like oh like smart, like quiet, nerdy and all that. And like I like kind of fit into like all those stereotypes, not because like I'm Asian, but like I genuinely like am an introverted. Like I prefer like smaller gatherings. I used to like I love reading and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And because of it just like kind of like puts me into like this hole or like this identity where society puts a label on you and you kind of fit into that mold that society puts. But doing so, like it like helps me cultivate like my Asian like American heritage helps me like cultivate like prioritizing like academics, prioritizing like family and all that, which is like very good stuff. It also like puts the limit on other stuff too, like because when I was growing up, there weren't any Asian Americans in like media. There weren't any like I wasn't exposed to any Asian Americans in like humanities and philosophy and like in literature and like other fields other than like academic STEM or medicine. I never really like saw myself as anything else like other than like to be successful you have to be like the stereotypical doctor lawyer engineer, and that just breeds a lot of like resentment like within like the like to yourself and like to other people too, because you kind of pigeonhole yourself into one idea of yourself without exploring different avenues. And I think Asian Americans and like specifically are like there's a lot like they fall victim to that because like most of like a lot of people come into college don't know what to do, and because they see, oh, I'm Asian, blah blah blah, I'm gonna be like a doctor, engineer, whatever, and they end up hating it. I know a lot of people who like joined like who entered college as pre-med just end up dropping out of the first semester because they just hated that like lifestyle and they hated that like that way of thinking. I know a lot of people who are like more creative and after like they drop like a STEM way of thinking or like a STEM lifestyle and they towards like a humanities or like art and all that, they're a lot happier and a lot more confident with who they've become and what they're doing than they were before.
Well, how did that contrast to your experience when you were in Vietnam, where over there I assume you're viewed more as an American?
Well, in Vietnam, I was like viewed as a foreigner, but like the thing is, in Vietnam, it's a very homogenized society. So like not every like people understood that like not everyone has to be a doctor or engineer. There were Vietnamese people in Vietnamese like media. There were Vietnamese people who were playwrights. There were Vietnamese people who like held governmental positions. Well, they have to like there has to be. There's Vietnamese people who work in entertainment like over there because society is so homogenized. You weren't defined on your race or your ethnic ethnicity. You like I'm not saying it's easier to like pursue what you want to do in Vietnam because that's not true at all. I'm just saying society doesn't put a label on you like because of your race.
Mm-hmm. What was your experience like then? Because you said you were viewed as the foreigner.
Um, when I came back to Vietnam, my Vietnamese was very very limited, so I didn't really like. speak to many people. Like I was like still like I was like naturally introverted, and I sometimes wonder if that's like why I became even more introverted like after middle school.
Hmm.
But because like the foreigner, like people, like I was a middle schooler, so I don't really know what my parents expected me to do. Like I didn't really know what like people thought I was gonna do, but I was just like, I don't know. I think like in middle school we don't really know what we want to do. We're just trying to have fun, I guess, or just disobey your parents.
Talk to me a little bit about what the difference was like socially between the U.S. and Vietnam.
Socially, I think my lack of Vietnamese didn't like put me in like a limited friend group where like I could only like, communicate to like people with more westernized like exposure, like people who could afford to like watch Western media. And in a way, it put me in a higher socioeconomical class, like interacting with people from like higher socioeconomical class. In Vietnam, there's like English tutoring places like after school and like programs like that. And that's where I made most of my friends just because I could communicate with them. And I didn't really like, get to like interact with like people of like a lower social like economic or people who weren't as fortunate as me to like receive that kind of education.
I'm not entirely sure how to segue this, but I'm curious what you think about the model minority myth.
I think like model minority, like there, like everything else in life, like there's the good sides and bad sides. Like I'm like very happy, like thinking about like I'm very happy. Like my family comes from like an academic family, because so like it opens a lot of opportunities for me growing up and developing into the person I am right now, a person who's like curious about like how life works and like how like science. Like I am a huge nerd, and I was ashamed of that like growing up because apparently it was a bad thing to do. But now like I'm more confident in who I am, my own identity. I can like show and express as much interest I can to like specific subject without like anyone judging me or like not caring about their judgment. And I think like the model minority, the keep your head down, work hard thing, it's very like it's stoic, like in the way of stoicism. And in the West, there's like a rising trend of stoicism. Like all the popular self-help books are like just work hard and like eventually it will come. So I think that approach is like helpful in some situations, but like harmful in other ways. Like for example, like lately, like the whole COVID-19 situation, how Asians are being victimized again, like and having like hate crimes committed against. Like Andrew Yang, he like said something very controversial. He released like I don't know if you've seen it, but like he released a statement saying that we have to prove our Americanness
Yeah, I
to.
wanted to bring that up next, actually. But yeah, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
do not agree with that because I don't think that there is there is an American culture, but like our culture, our Asian American heritage is part of that American culture. We're not like it's not like two different things. Like Asian Americans, people who immigrated to America from Asia, also helped build this country up. Like the railroads and way before way before like this century, like there were so many immigrants from like China and Japan.
Right.
America was just a forming like country, and by proving our Americanness to other people, I think that's just another way of like how Asian, like why we're getting victimized, because Asian Amer like like the Eastern culture, we're not taught to like defend ourselves. We were just saying like it will like stoicism, like oh like don't do harm to other people, just like sit quietly and let that happen to you. Like sometimes it worked, but other times you have to stand up for yourself, you know? Like I'm not saying like physically, but like, you also have to like voice your own opinions and be assertive with some things. And I think that's like why the trait that like Asian Americans lack the most. Because if the whole Harvard lawsuit, like the whole admissions scandal, if you read the files, like a lot of Asian Americans, when people were evaluating their like files, everyone's saying they're not assertive enough, they're too Asian. They're like this just seems like another like everyone seems the same. They just have perfect stats, but they don't. There's no person like their quote unquote reason why for rejections. They don't have any personality or they weren't assertive enough. They weren't individual enough in a way. And I think, yeah, that is a problem. And I think that like it's a systemic problem, but also something that we as individuals can like deal with too.
Right. That yeah, that's true. I think Asians in particular have always been um, not necessarily told, I have actively told to like not speak up or anything, but I think it's
Yeah,
just kind of ingrained in the culture where
yeah,
you respect. the
authority.
way, yeah, the authority you respect elders, and people who just
Well, there is like a certain like beauty in that. There is like wisdom in that, as there's wisdom in everything. But like I said, it doesn't like there's that's like what you have to figure out for yourself. Like in which situations do you apply that wisdom? And I think right now we need to apply less of that and be more assertive and be more proud of who we are as Asian Americans or as people in this country and part of the Asian, I mean, part of the American culture. And just like in addition to that, I don't think we should just do this for our own race, but like I can admit, like as I think the Asian community in itself, it's like very like secluded, and
mhm.
I think we should be like as a whole should be more open to other races too, because like I know like a lot of older generation of Asians are very racist, and I think we should acknowledge those racisms and bigotry and ignorance in our own communities, as well as address them in society as a whole. You know, I know my family, like the older generation in my family, there have been a lot of hateful and like ignorant comments and like statements about other minorities,
Right.
which I have tried to correct, and I am still actively trying to correct and like show them like it's not that way, or that's not the right thing to do. And I think by being just inclusive to everyone, like standing up for other people's rights, we can assure that our rights are being stand up for too, and our identity is being protected as well as other people. I don't think it's just an Asian versus everyone else thing. I think it's a joint effort of all the races just standing up for each other.
Right. How do you feel about like moving forward, in terms of the Asian American community? Like, do you think that these antiquated beliefs will like die off as
I,
or
I it's as passive as that. I think like I understand why like Asian Americans like we've always been considered the model minority, and because of that, like some people want to preserve our status that like as long as it doesn't affect me, I'm fine. Sure, that's like a good way of thinking for yourself,
right,
but it harms other people. And I think now that we are realizing that, like once the hatred comes back to us, and
right,
now we just that we can prevent this kind of hatred by standing out against other minority, like for other minority groups, and help them in their battles. So like that hatred doesn't affect anyone else. In the end, we're all human beings. There is no such thing as race. If you think about it from a scientific standpoint,
right.
race is like a social construct meant to oppress minorities or like people who are not in power. And by as a whole, Asian like Americans should be more active in fighting against racism across the entire board, not just for their own race, but for everyone else. If like people in your community, I know like Asian, like there's a lot of like TikToks and like a lot of people like joking about how like people like of Asian like Asian Americans would sometimes say the N word and like sometimes use racial slurs. And I think that's 100% not fine. I think that's repulsive, and I think we should fix that behavior in our community first.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the main issue I have with believing in and living by the model minority myth is that it somewhat encourages a level of passiveness, especially for things that don't directly affect our community. And also, I mean, I don't want to go too far into this because it'll open a huge can of worms, but I think also Asian Americans have contributed to an anti-blackness in the U.S.
Yes, I 100% agree. I know, like, I know, just not even like anti-blackness as like a race, but just like of skin tone too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, as we talked about at the beginning, South Asian countries are very underrepresented, even within our own media.
Well, not even just America. I know in the East, there's like a whole like there's a lot of stuff had like in the less progressive countries where like most of the people in the media are all like they all have Eurocentric features. They all have pale skin and like just other like white dominant features.
Right. So for time, I think we should end it right about there. I think we've covered a lot of great things, and of course, this whole topic of anti-blackness, I think, is a whole other discussion unto itself. But you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I think we should just, like I said, just reiterating my point about like being more inclusive to people in general, not just Asians, but like just people, you know,
Right.
treat everyone as people, see yourselves in other people and see their humanity, not just what they look like, but their humanity. Like treat people as people, you know? That's all I can say. that being said, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for accepting the invite and being our first guest.
I mean, gotta do what you gotta do to promote your ideas, and what you believe in. Like I said, be more assertive. Just be passive and hope that everything turns out well.
Certainly some food for thought to leave us with. Thank you again, Quan, for being on episode 1 of our show. And of course, thank you to everyone listening in. We hope you found this interesting in some way. Just want to make a quick disclaimer before we go, saying that all the ideas and opinions shared by me or the guest on the show do not necessarily reflect the values of AHM as a club or NYU as an institution. This is just simply an outlet for people to share ideas and concepts that they want to talk about. And we think it's important to continue the conversation and have these discussions not only in times of quarantine, but in general to celebrate Apata Heritage Month. So we thank you again. Hope to see you in episode 2, and stay safe.